Hi, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and I am here on behalf of Newsweek, and I am so pleased to be interviewing today the founders of Thinkers 50, Des Dearlove and Stuart Crainer. We're going to be talking about business trends in 2021 and beyond. If you are not familiar with it, what Thinkers 50 is the biennial ranking of the world's top management thinkers. Stuart and Des have been doing this since 2001, 20 years. And so they have an amazing and in-depth longitudinal perspective about how the world of business has changed and is changing. Gentlemen, so pleased to have you here.
Hi, Dorie.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So glad that you're here. And I'd also like to welcome the folks who are tuning in live to join us. Please go ahead and type into the chat box and let us know you're here. We want to, give you a shout out and thank you for participating. We're going to be taking questions from Stuart and Des throughout the course of our time together. So please let us know what's on your mind and the questions that you have for them. So, gentlemen, I'd love to actually start out. You have some big news today. You have just literally today announced the Thinkers 50 2021 Radar Thinkers. These are the emerging management thinkers that you have identified as having the potential to really shape the course of the business world in the future. So the first question, and maybe I'll address this one to Des. So how do you pick these people, right? There are a lot of smart people out there. And so I'm curious, what is it about the nature of them or their ideas that enables you to say, yes, these are the folks that we really believe are going to be shaping things?
Well, it's a great question. And I mean, as you say, we do a radar list. We announce the radar list every year in January. And we try to identify a group of people, thinkers, who have something relevant, particularly interesting to say at this moment in time. We also we hope that these people will come through in the fullness of time and make their way into the full Thinkers 50 list. But it's a sort of a way of welcoming and showcasing them to the community. Unlike the actual ranking, which is obviously a more rigorous methodology, the radar is more a little bit more absolute. It gives us a little bit. We can have a bit more fun with it. It's a bit freer. But the criteria really we look for are very, very global, very, very diverse, very eclectic, and we try to pick up on some of the big themes that we think are going to be important in the next year. So we look for people doing work adjacent to those sorts of things, and we rely very heavily on people like yourself to tell us, your eyes and ears too, to tell us who out there that you're coming across is doing really interesting work. Did you want to add to that, Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we aim for with the Thinkers 50 radar is an eclectic and inspiring list of people who we think are doing interesting work that we hope will change the world for the better in the future. So we have people from throughout the world. It's actually come to the stage now where we used to put people's nationality next to their names, but it's so global that it becomes impossible to keep track of. Because everybody, I say, there was somebody in this one, the Danish thinker, and I was quickly corrected that she was Spanish, though momentarily based in Denmark. And there's a host of so what's really exciting is the global element of the ranking and of the radar. When we first started doing the Thinkers 50 in 2001, which you've kindly reminded, which makes us both feel very old. In 2001, it was dominated by Americans, because the world of management thinking then was totally dominated by American academics, American consultants. And over the period of 20 years, it has become truly globalized. And hopefully we reflect that in the makeup of the 30 people we select for the radar and the 50 people who make the Thinkers 50 ranking.
I think you raise a really important point, Stuart, about the increased globalization of the list and of management thinking in general. And it gives us a great opportunity to say hello to some of the wonderful folks who are tuning in and joining us. We have Nihar in Dallas. We have Carlos from Colombia, Todd from New York. We have Michael from Chicago, Rosinda from Mexico, Gosha from England, Elliot from Botswana. Oh my goodness. We have Temi from Nigeria, Michael from Canada, Lisa from Atlanta. So we're so happy to have all of you guys here. Welcome. If you're enjoying this conversation, be sure to hit the like button and the share button so other people can benefit from the insights of Des and Stuart. And I just want to say, of course, I'm very proud to be part of the Thinkers 50 community. I have my special Thinkers 50 playing card, which is very exciting to be one of your ranked thinkers. So thank you for that. And a question that I actually have heard from a number of folks, Stuart and Des, and I want to ask it on their behalf, is there are a lot of people out there that really want to be making a difference and want to be making an impact in the business world. They want their ideas to be heard and would love to, somehow get on the radar of Thinkers 50. Perhaps it's radar list or the general list of thinkers. For folks who are interested in, really raising their platform, kicking it up a notch, and making a full impact, what would you advise if someone aspires to be on the Thinkers 50 list? What do they need to do? How do they need to get noticed? How should they be thinking about their work? Maybe we'll start with Stuart. What would your thoughts be about someone who aspires to be part of this community?
What we're looking for is thinkers who have got ideas that make a difference in the real world. There's lots of academics who work in business schools who do esoteric research, and they can't point to a direct influence on improving corporate performance or organizational life or life in general. So what we're looking for is people who make a difference. So the number one thinkers on the Thinkers 50 ranking at the moment are Chang Kim and Rennie Moburn, who are the authors of the book Blue Ocean Strategy. Now, you could debate the idea of blue ocean strategy to the cows come home, but they have had a manifest effect on people's performance and how people perceive strategy, how people practice it. And that's what we're looking for. So the previous number one was Roger Martin, the Canadian-born author who's got a new book out. And he's worked very closely he's a proper academic who does really in-depth research, but he's worked very closely with Lego. He worked with A.G. Lafley at Procter & Gamble to make things happen. So in the end, what we're looking for is people who want to make things happen. And a big difference that's happened over the 20 years is that in 2001, the kind of the perspective of people's research was quite narrow. People wanted to improve shareholder value or increase profitability and not much else. Now the thinkers we feature want to improve organizations, but they want to make the world a better place.
I think that's quite powerful. Des, do you have any thoughts that you wanted to add?
In terms of what we look for, I think that it's becoming increasingly global. I mean, it's a very open process in the sense that people are very welcome to get in touch with us. In fact, we encourage people to draw our attention to the work they're doing and to make the connection for us and to tell us, why they should be on the radar. So if you go to our website, go to the Thinkers 50 website, you'll see there's they obviously just missed it for this year, but come sort of November, December time, we're very actively sort of prospecting for gold. So we really encourage people to come forward and tell us about the work they're doing, or get a friend or a colleague, even better, to nominate them and say, hey, this person's made a big difference to my company or to my work. That's what we're looking for, because as Stuart says, the proof is in the pudding. Really, we want impact. We don't just want ideas. We really want to put the ideas to work, and that's very much at the core of what we do. I mean, we're really excited that 2021 is a Thinkers 50 year. So we've got a whole bunch of activities going throughout the year, which kicks off with the radar. But it feels like a time when we need human ingenuity and fresh thinking as never before. We kind of built the whole Thinkers 50 idea on our belief that ideas do matter and ideas can make a difference if they're applied. And that, if you like, innovation and human ingenuity is the kind of superhuman power, our human superpower that will get us out of this hole, get us through the crisis. So in a way, it's a very good time to be having a Thinkers 50 year and to be really looking for these brilliant ideas.
That's terrific, Des. Thank you very much. And just the last question on the new radar list, we had a question come in actually from Monica. Hi, Monica. She wants to know, can you give an example from this year's radar? Obviously, there's 30 people on the list. We can't name all of them, and they are all special in their own ways. But just by way of example, maybe if you could share one or two stories about who these folks are and just a little bit illustratively of what kinds of topics they are focusing on. So maybe we go to Stuart.
Yeah.
A couple who are on the radar this year are Leon and Simone Phipps, and their work. They're authors of African American Management History, a really good book, and they alerted us to the work of Charles Clinton Spalding, who's now in the Thinkers 50 Hall of Fame. And their idea, which comes from Spalding's work, is about cooperative advantage, which is completely different from competitive advantage. And their research is exploring, they're based at Chicago State and Clayton State universities. Their work is exploring how cooperation can give you a competitive advantage. There's a good article by them in the Sloan Management Review. And they're typical of the kind of people we're trying to feature, people with a really novel idea, which actually makes intuitive sense. But an area of like cooperation has been, like 20 years ago, wasn't really on the radar of anyone, but now is. So that's Leon Prieto and Simone Phipps, and they're really good, I think. And another one who I really like is Christian Sarkar.
I was going to say that. Yeah, Christian stuff is good. He talked about an ecosystem of wicked problems, basically, and what that we need brand activism and organizations to really start to tackle some of the problems. And he started an organization called wicked7.org. But we go back with him away because a few years ago, he won the Thinkers 50 Breakthrough Idea Award with his $300 house idea with Vijay Govindarajan. So again, it's an idea that was put into practice and really trying to make a difference in the world.
And I think someone like Christian, who's basically an activist,
yeah,
he's a campaigner and an activist, but in the organizational space. And I think that's a big message for the future. We had a session with Rosabeth Moss-Cantor in last summer, and she was talking about activism and the importance of activism. And another researcher called Megan Rates from Ashridge Hult in the UK has just done some more research about the activist employee. And I think that's one of the trends I think for this year and the future is that the very role of the employee will change. And that to be an activist employee is not the exception, but in many organizations will be expected. And I think that's a big change, and one that hopefully the radar picks up with Christian Sarkar's involvement.
That's a really interesting point, Stuart. Thank you. And for anyone who wants to check out the list of Thinkers 50 radar thinkers for 2021, just go to the website, thinkers50.com. You can check everything out there and learn more about the organization. I'd also like to give a special shout out to some of the folks who are tuning in to join us. We've got Emily from Los Angeles, Yaroslav from Florida. We have Barbara from Slovenia, Vicky from Boston, many more. We're so glad to have all of you here. Thanks for taking part in this. And of course, you can type your questions for Stuart and Des into the chat box. Would love to take your questions. Des, I wanted to actually ask you, obviously, for 2020, the not so elephant in the room, because we're all aware of it, is we had a pretty crazy year with this COVID situation. I am curious to hear your thoughts over the course of 2020. I know Thinkers 50 really did a great job of trying to help provide guidance and context for people in the business world. I participated in one of your agility webinars that you did. I know that you had many more. But what ideas or concepts do you feel like were most salient or perhaps newly relevant during COVID? Were there particular ideas that stood out as particularly essential during this time?
I think we probably, hopefully, some I'd like to think some lessons learned. I mean, obviously, we saw great examples of good leadership in a crisis, and we saw some not so good examples of not so good leadership in a crisis. But I think some trends which were clear or are clear now is I think we woke up to some things. So I think we woke up to the fragility of global supply chains. I think that was revealed. And I think, you're talking about ideas. I think an idea for 2021, which is already establishing itself, is we used to talk about just-in-time supply chains and logistics. I think now we're moving to talk about just-in-case supply chains. So building in a little bit of spare capacity, sourcing things closer to home, closing the distance, whereas before we thought we could source anything from wherever it was cheapest in the world, and we didn't really think about this fragility point. I think the diversity issue has become an even bigger issue than perhaps it was in the past, and hopefully that's going to continue. Well, I'm sure it is with Black Lives Matter and one thing or another. It's going to continue to be very salient. We've seen, how important that is. And I think people now are beginning to really address it well, I hope in a serious way. I think another thing, the last one that I'll say is, I think we've seen a move away, which we were seeing anyway in the 21st century, but a move away from pure efficiency as the model towards something which favors adaptability and innovation, from sort of zero defects to zero distance, as the Chinese company Hire would put it. And I think we can expect to see more of that. And it's almost away from economies of scale towards economies of speed and innovation. I mean, a great example of that is how quickly the vaccines have been developed. I mean, extraordinary innovation and pace of change. And that's, I think, we'll see more of that. I think that's the direction that business has to move in. And I don't think we're going to go back to the old world, by the way. I think we're in a very much in a new world when we do finally come out of this unfortunate tunnel that we're in at the moment, but we will come out. I mean, as I said before, I think human ingenuity is the way we'll come out, and we're seeing that come through.
The Chinese company Des mentioned, Hire, the biggest white goods company in the world, is a company we know really well, and they've got a Chinese word for their philosophy. It's called Renden Hai, and Renden Hai is a fusion of three words: employee plus customer plus value. And I think what we've learned through the pandemic is that those are the basic elements. Is it a reminder of the basic elements of organization and commercial life? Employees, customers, and the value they create in interaction. They don't exist in isolation. And I think what I hope going forward is that we'll continue to reevaluate those relationships, because organizations as they stand, I know you're going to have Martin Lindstrom as a guest in a few weeks, and his new book, The Ministry of Common Sense, points out so many examples where organizations work against their own customers with their ridiculous procedures, and they work against their own employees. So I hope that the pandemic will lead to a reevaluation, and we'll return to the basics of business and organizational life, which is providing enriching experiences for employees and creating great opportunities for customers and generating value from that interaction. So I'm kind of hopeful that the pandemic has kind of allowed us to press pause and created a period of reflection. But I think there are a lot of questions it raises that are completely unanswered, like leadership, for instance, as Des says.
Really interesting, Stuart. Thank you. And I'd actually like to follow up with you on something. We had a great question come in from Jennifer. She wants to know, what are your thoughts about the impact that COVID may have had on business idea generation? Do you see more ideas with impact today as compared to pre-COVID? For instance, are people now feeling so motivated by the level of crisis that we've experienced that there's perhaps more of a desire to be hands-on or more of a desire to be practical? Or have you not necessarily seen too much of a difference? What are your thoughts about that, Stuart?
Yeah, I think theoretically you would expect it to be, it's a bit like frugal innovation, isn't it? Left your own, when you've got these are the elements you've got to create something out of, and the elements aren't going to change. It inspires you to be more creative. And Navi Raju, who's the creator of Frugal Innovation, is one of the people we've featured on the Thinkers 50. But I don't think, I think I think the jury's still out on that. But I think perhaps it will become clear in the next couple of years, the impact of how innovative we actually were during the pandemic. There's no obvious sense from my experience that we've suddenly become more creative, more innovative because we're in this situation.
I think there was almost that Apollo 13 moment, isn't it? You know, when the astronauts are stuck up in a crisis situation and they empty the contents of what they've got onto the table and they have to work with that to create an air pump or something. I forget what it is now. But we've had to kind of work with what was available, and the biggest or the scarcest resource being the time there was to develop vaccines, because we needed a solution very, very quickly, as they did with bringing the astronauts back. And I think people have responded to that. And it is interesting how extraordinary human beings are when they really have to do something. I'm sure all sorts of rules have been broken, all sorts of assumptions have been challenged. I'm sure lots and lots of things have been moved to one side in order to make this happen. And it'll be interesting to see whether we can retain some of that extraordinary performance as we go forward. I mean, interesting too, a book that's out at the moment, Erin Meyer's written a book with the CEO of Netflix.
She was a guest a couple of weeks ago.
No, she sends her regards. I spoke to her yesterday. She sent her regards to you. So, no rules. And the thing with the Netflix culture is that if you've got grown-ups and very, very high talented people, you don't need as many rules, and you can start to get rid of the rules and allow people to really flourish and really, express themselves and achieve things and be really innovative. So it's interesting. I think that's good timing for that book as well. I've seen Netflix probably have done quite well in this pandemic because they're supplying entertainment to us as we're all kind of locked down. So yeah.
If ever there was a time for Netflix, it is the pandemic. Absolutely. That is for sure. Yeah. So thank you for the great questions that are coming in, everyone. If you have a question for Stuart and Des, please feel free to type it into the chat box. And also, if there are particular insights that are resonating with you, one of the best ways to help emblazon them in your consciousness and share them with other people is to type into the chat box what those insights are. So, gentlemen, a question came in from Nihar, our great friend who's an HBR and Forbes contributor. Nihar is curious if you see an increase perhaps in thought leadership around corporate social responsibility. For instance, how in the US CEOs are finally realizing they might be contributing to national instability. Has there been any kind of a potential awakening around that? Is there sort of a CSR or corporate social responsibility trend at all?
One of the thinkers on the radar, Matthew Gitsham, from Holt Ashridge, is very much on the sustainability agenda and working closely with CEOs to see how they understand the issues. So one of the reasons we chose him is because we're optimistic that people might be more awake. I think we saw that a little bit. I think that there were a group of CEOs who resisted. Obviously, unfortunately, as far as the rest of the world is concerned, America did drop out of the Paris Agreement and hopefully is about to rejoin. But I think, there were CEOs who simply didn't accept that and just said, well, as far as we're concerned, we're still, part of the same planet and we're still going to work towards these goals. So I think that was a very healthy sign. And I do think something shifted. Call me an optimist, but I do think something has shifted. It has to shift. I think we know that. I think we can see that. We can see the implications. And yeah. So I'm fingers crossed. I'm optimistic that we are moving in that direction.
I think Gina Cox has got a question about a trend towards the rehumanization of the workplace, and I think that's something that comes across on our radar. That bringing humanity to technology and the relationship between humanity and technology is the big issue of our times. I think we've spent the last 5 or so years luxuriating and celebrating the fantastic advances in technology, but now the issue is how we interact with it and how we maximize its impact on our lives for the betterment of our lives, such as working at home. I think the genie is out of the bottle. In the UK, the government tried to get people to go back to work in their offices late last year, And their justification for that was, well, that's what they've always done. And there's all these sandwich shops in London which are struggling because there's no office workers there. And that was their justification. There was no mention of, well, actually, efficiency hasn't dropped. Everything suggests people are more efficient and happier if they've got a choice where they work. So I think there's lots of issues which the pandemic has raised, which will play out. I think the role of the CEOs is interesting, because I think the CEOs of major corporations have actually been notable by their absence in providing great leadership over the last year. And I would like to see a kind of recalibration of the role and rewards and attitude to CEOs, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, in the way that CEOs see their role, I mean, a favourite of ours in the UK is a guy called Henry Stuart, and he's the CEO of a company called Happy. And he has this pre-approval process where he says to his employees, says to his people, don't bother asking me, it's pre-approved. If you think it's the right thing to do, I've hired you. I trust my judgment that I've hired the talented person. Don't ask me. It's get on with it. Which is actually mirrors the Netflix culture too. It's this sense of don't let the CEO be the almighty power. Let the people go forth and do what they want to do.
And we should mention Todd, who's just commented that he's bought a variety of our books.
Yes, Todd. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Todd.
We are always glad about that. Todd is a longtime fan of the ultimate books. Todd Church is a great thinker and author of Visual Leadership, based out of New York City. So thank you for that, Todd. So viewers, if you have been enjoying this conversation and you would like to make sure that you never miss another one, you can actually subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. You can do DorieClark.com/LinkedIn, hit the subscribe button, and you will be reminded every week about the great conversations we have with folks like Stuart and Des. And if you would like to learn more about the great work the Thinkers 50 does, go to thinkers50.com and you can make sure to check out all of their work and sign up for their newsletters. Stuart and Des, we have time for probably just one more question, but a great one came in that I would love to point out here from Barbara in Slovenia. And she was curious, do you have thoughts about the top global risks for 2021 that leadership should pay attention to today and tomorrow? What do you see on the horizon that we need to mitigate or to guard against? Stuart, perhaps we can start with you.
I think the biggest risk is that we don't learn from the experience of the last year. What have we really learned? What have organizations learned? What have CEOs learned from the last year? And they've got to be very clear what those lessons are, and they've got to implement and make them happen. I noticed a comment by Stephen Thompson, who talks about bureaucracy and regulation, and that we all talk about there being bad things and nothing ever happens. But in the end, people have got to make things happen. People have got to speak truth to power. People have got to stand up. CEOs have got to lead. And so things need to change, but there needs to be a clear idea what people have learned and what they're going to change to lead to a better world. Fantastic.
Des, do you have thoughts to add?
I mean, it's kind of the inverse of that. I think it's the complacency. I think that's the risk, is that we do settle back. I do believe this generation of CEOs and business leaders and the people who are coming through now have a unique opportunity and platform to make a difference in a way that everything's been thrown up in the air and it's going to land, and it can land differently if we allow it to land differently. And I think the danger would be to go back to the old ways. Clearly, the pandemic isn't over yet either. We need to tread carefully as we come through that. And I think another concern is that companies need to stay optimistic. We must hope for the best, even though we plan for the worst, if you like. And I think it's no good just dismissing the danger and the risk. We have to mitigate it, but I think we have to look beyond it as well, and look towards a better future.
It's a powerful note to end on. Stuart, do you have any last words? I look like I almost cut you off.
I'm just looking at Sophia's comment about middle managers. I think Tom Peters wrote in 1992, middle managers are cooked geese, suggesting that middle management had its day. And I think it certainly has.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a half hour of fascinating insights, gentlemen. We have featured Stuart Crainer and Des Dearlove of Thinkers 50 talking about business trends in 2021 and beyond. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next Thursday. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Dorie.